This is Correct Anime Takes Episode 1, recorded on December 28, 2023. Welcome one and all to the very first episode of Correct Anime Takes. My name is Rosie McDamsel, and I'm joined by the incredible Noth.
Hi, I'm Noth.
So, are you excited to do this?
Yes, I am.
Yes?
I am excited indeed, yes, very excited. I love the name. I wonder how long it'll be before people get it, then I remember you made a logo.
Well, you know, if there's one thing that anime is universally about, it is about cats. So I think we're gonna be fine. I think people will understand. Especially because we do in fact have the correct takes.
We do.
I'm very nervous, so if I speak too fast on this first episode, that will be why. I'm gonna do my best here, though. So, what do we do on this show?
We're gonna talk about anime and have correct takes.
Yeah. Well, you know, the reason we're doing this is Noth and I already talk everyone's ears off about anime in our gaming stream, so we figure we could just localize that, just compartmentalize that into a neat package.
And then do it on the game streams anyways, probably.
Probably. But if you want your anime takes without being interrupted by Final Fantasy 16, how dare it? You can come here. We'll discuss anime news, shows new and old, and our own opinions, which are correct. But for those of you who haven't watched our gaming content, you may be wondering, who the f*** are you? Should I have not sworn there?
I don't know, it's your podcast.
Answer in the comments if we should swear on the podcast or not.
You can always put a funny noise over top of it to censor it.
That's true. Anyway, my name is Rosie, as I said. I've been watching anime my whole life, starting with the Slice of Lifey World Masterpiece Theater and similar shows that aired on Dutch TV in the 90s. I am Dutch. I am now living in the US. Then Dragon Ball Z came on, and I haven't been the same since. So, there you go.
She never recovered.
Yeah. It was all downhill from there, man. I love exploring a wide variety of shows. I love action, comedy, drama, romance, intrigue, what have you. Very character-focused person, so I don't really care if the world building is, like, intricate, as long as the characters are relatable. Some of my favorite shows include Record of Lodoss War, Lupin the Third, Cardcaptor Sakura, and Full Metal Alchemist, the 2003 one, not Brotherhood.
She will fight you.
Never Brotherhood.
She will fight you about that.
So who are you?
I'm Noth. I've been watching anime since... I don't know the exact date, because about the time I hit, like, you know, consciousness and started remembering from day to day.
Right.
I'm sure, like, Pokemon was on the air, but the first anime that really just, like, got its claws into me, and I was cognizantly aware that it was very different from the other shows I was watching, was Gundam Wing. And if we ever talk about that, I'm going to have a lot to say.
There will be plenty of classics we're going to be able to talk
about. Oh, yeah. There is
awesome.
There's a particular scene in Gundam Wing Endless Waltz that has just been, like, perma-locked into my subconscious. I'm sure it will surprise nobody if we ever talk about which one it actually is. I like shows, as in, like, anime. I like anything that makes me feel something,
right.
Like, increasingly. I'm not really... I need to stop umming. Because that's unprofessional. That's professional.
Haha.
We gotta leave that bit in now, just for the pun.
Okay.
Like, yeah, anything that makes me feel something I enjoy. Typically, I don't need, like, some kind of smug sense of just, like, you're already a cool guy. I'm like, no, I don't need that. I really am not looking for anything groundbreaking in the anime I watch. Like, I will go on record that I am a huge fan of, you know, like Rosie, Record of Lodoss War, which is as basic bitch fantasy as you can possibly get, and it's very, very good at it. The OVA especially. The TV series, which picks up after, I think, 2/3 of the OVA has happened. Ignore the last third. Also very good, especially when the second main character, Spark, suddenly, like, flips his switch and becomes a cool person. Instead of just kind of like the whiniest Crispin Freeman ever. going off of Lodo, some of my other favorite shows are by the same author. Well, the source material is by the same author. Record of Grand Crest War, again, it's not going to blow anybody's minds, but it's very good at what it does. It's like, in the day and age it came out, which still only feels like 2 years ago, I'm sure it's more. It was just a fantasy show, and we will get into this, I'm sure, without, like, RPG mechanics or, like, reincarnation. It was just, here's a fantasy world, here's the people doing cool things in it. Awesome. And probably one of my favorite anime ever, Chivalry of a Failed Knight, which is just take every, like, magic battle high school trope you've ever seen, and then, hey, what if we did, like, something with them? And what if we told an actual story that went somewhere, and we centered the emotional core of it on the two protagonists' like romantic relationship, where they hook up early on and then actually really develop, not develop online anime speak, really develop as a couple. God, I love it. I think I have more because I can talk about myself a lot. I didn't know how much to prep. I could stop there if you want.
Well, you know, don't like go into our other sections, I suppose.
Yeah. All right, wrapping this up, I guess, like, based on my tastes, I kind of like almost the, like, I'm still trying to find these sort of adolescent fantasies, because even when I was in high school, I was really picky and aware of, like, what I did or didn't like. I remember watching a show for all of 2 or 3 episodes, and then another girl showed up, and I turned it off and never went back. Because I was just like, oh, that's what you're doing. F*** off. Whoops. You know, demographics are just kind of stupid, so who knows, like, just, you know, how adolescent some of those things really are. Because you can make the argument, like, even Lodos is adolescent in a way.
Yeah, I mean, demographics are just for marketing. They're like,
Yeah.
It's stupid to be like, oh, this says it's for kids, so I can't watch it. This says it's for teenagers, so I can't watch it.
Yeah,
you know?
there are things that are very, like, consciously written for, like, you know, a certain age group. I'll, you know, never deny that. No one's going to say, like, yeah, I wrote this episode of Power Rangers for adults. Not going to happen. But it's also not, like, going to, like, preclude your enjoyment for it.
Yeah.
And so the last thing in my very lengthy introduction is I am myself a writer. I, thanks to Rosie, have had to, like, actually think about what I write from the perspective of what is my work saying? What is the theme? What are the metaphors I am employing in my story? And so that really matters to me a lot now. We will, I'm sure, talk about anime that are very, like, that are based on source material that's not written like that, where they're just writing a series of events, which means anything, like, theme or message-wise that the show is saying is entirely accidental, and that can lead to some really awkward things. And so, basically, one more last thing. If I am watching a show or playing a game and thinking this is not as good or better than if an amateur would have written it, I get mad. So that's me 5 hours later.
Don't worry, we'll put a timestamp on it on YouTube. Well, with that out of the way, let's get into the meat and potatoes of the thing. And first, we're going to look at some news.
Wow!
Do you like my little jingle?
I love that jingle. I'm so happy every time I hear it.
News. What do we got this time? What do we got?
Chivalry of a Failed Knight is dead. Long live Chivalry of a Failed Knight.
So you didn't even need to talk about it before. You could have done it now.
Yes.
So Chivalry of a Failed Knight, the light novel, has ended in Japan with volume 19. They released like a celebratory, really cool special edition, which I'm pretty sure is already sold out. So
we got one. Woo!
Yeah, brag about materialism.
The art book is big.
It's got an art
beautiful
book and a big wall scroll. I now own a wall scroll. We didn't own any wall scrolls yet. We're fake anime fans. But at the same time, J-Novel Club has licensed the English language rights to Chivalry and has started releasing them. for those of you who don't know, the series was previously licensed by Soul Press, aka the Devil. Soul Press
Oh my
is
God.
gone forever, so gone that it is impossible to even license the translation from them. So J Novel had to do a brand new translation. It reads a little different,
Yeah, and
maybe not as good.
yeah, so for all of the many bad things we could say about Soul Press, the Chivalry translation was amazing. I almost said the bad word. It was
Yeah.
very, very good, and I am sad we don't have it. What I did see of the J Novel Club translation is like a little weird. I'm kind of hoping that's just because they're in this awkward spot where they can't be too like the Soul Press translation, and then once they get past that, which would be volume 6, I think, they'll be a lot more free to, do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And thank you, J Novel Club.
We are very grateful. Let there be no mistake.
If John J Novel Club guy somehow ends up listening to this, thank you so goddamn much.
Yeah, I've only read part 1. I do not have a J Novel Club subscription. I don't plan to get one because I'd be paying $5 a month for less than one volume of a light novel. Because I don't read that many light novels, and a lot of what J Novel Club has is, shall we say, not in my field of interest.
Spoilers,
and
we don't like isekai.
and the stuff they do have is often stuff that also gets a physical release, and I prefer physical books, so, I'm not going to read Slayers on there. I'm just going to wait for the cool omnibuses. Buy those. They're great.
And you should prefer physical media, too. This is a correct media take. Prefer physical.
I don't think that's even really, what are you going to say against that, really?
I don't like shelves. I'm serious.
I don't like tangible matter. How dare you?
I'm serious. I've seen people be like, oh, it's just so much work having to, keep track of a physical collection. And I was just like, that's very nice. I cannot wait for them to turn off your things.
It's, that sounds like a them problem.
Yep.
You don't have to buy the physical things. Digital has its advantages, but it should be a supplement to physical.
Yeah.
Because digital has inherent problems, like the fact that they can just take it away most of the time. And even if you don't, even if you have like a DRM-free file that you can just put on your hard drive and then back it up a million times, bit rot is still gonna exist. But we can find, ancient artifacts from Roman times, and they'll be readable. So there you go.
Should we actually talk about why we care about chivalry? And, why people should care?
Well, you certainly already made a good start on that.
Yeah, I did, didn't I, huh?
But what's great about Chivalry is that, it takes these kind of worn-out tropes, and I absolutely don't blame anyone for, looking at, part 1 on J Novel and going, oh, it's the typical, Battle High School where the guy sucks but he doesn't actually suck, and then he walks in on a half-naked princess. Stick with it, please, I beg you. At least until the end of Volume 1, because it very quickly starts setting up that this is kind of like a Trojan horse, where it's these are these common things that your editor, if you're an author, will tell you, hey, do that, it sells. And I won't say it's not horny, it is, sometimes problematically so.
It's very horny, but most of the time it's in the form of the two protagonists, Iki and Stella, are very horny for each other. Because this author understands people have sex drives, both of the, genders.
Yeah, sometimes the horny is bad, but most of the time it's not.
And
yes?
I was going to say, I said both genders, but we all, it's not binary. I'm just using that for shorthand.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in most stories, you're still just going to have boys and girls. That's just...
Yeah.
That's what the majority of people are. It makes sense.
Chivalry does have a trans character, and they're awesome, though.
Yeah.
But, I would like to, just talk about that,
Do you want to just do a Chivalry feature episode?
At some point, I will say, one of the things I like about Chivalry, and you get to see this, in Volume 1, is... they kind of take the stupid tropes that you've always seen, and then they go 2 or 3 extra steps to show, we're doing something with it.
Mm-hmm.
The very first scene is Iki gets back to his dorm room, and Stella is in there in his underwear. Cliche. God damn it, me.
She's not in Iki's underwear, to clarify.
Yes. And so, Stella screams. It's gonna be that scene you've always seen, like you've seen a billion times. But then Iki's like, "Stop! I know what you're gonna do, and this looks bad. So let me take my clothes off, and we'll be even." Which is, the two, like the second step to take that into like crazy territory. That makes it funny. Then the third step is it smash cuts to the school director's office, and she's just like, "Do you want to get arrested for sexual harassment, you dumbass?" Because that's what would happen.
And then the entire funny thing is, like, neither of them was at fault because it was Iki's room, and it's also Stella's room, and the principal thought it would be really funny not to tell them.
Yeah, and the great thing that comes out of that is, like, as Iki and Stella bicker about it, he eventually admits, like, his brain short-circuited because he's never seen anybody as beautiful, which makes Stella's brain short-circuit. And then the other thing in that first volume that goes, like, the extra step is Chizuku, where you have seen way too many times, here's the cute little sister who's in love with her big brother. Chivalry takes it a step further by being, like, having Shizuku be like, "No, I want to bone him." And then everybody else being like, "That's weird.
That's disturbing.
You are wrong. Do not do that." And also basically being like, here is, like, Shizuku is a basket case and everybody knows it. Like, it's not just hee fetish bait.
The story itself also knows it and will, make jokes about that.
And is under no illusion she has any chance.
Now, here's one thing I want to say that's cool about Chivalry. A lot of light novels are ostensibly about misfits, that it'll be relatable to, nerds. And I'm not saying that in a derogatory way necessarily, we are also nerds. Nerds who don't feel like they belong, but often it comes out in this really juvenile way of like, "Oh, I'm getting bullied, but now I have the power, so now I can be the bully." Wait, no.
It's like...
Chivalry is... It goes a lot further in that. Because it actually explains, like, why this system would exclude Iki, even though he's a super strong badass.
And the great thing about it, too, is, like, Iki, on paper, is, like, weak as shit. But everybody who sees him in action is just like, what the hell? This guy's an incredible badass. And numerous times in the text, the characters are like, this system is dumb because it's excluding him, and he's clearly got the talent to, like, well, not the talent, like, the technique, because he works his ass off. And unlike other sort of, like, magic high school anime where it's like, "Oh, you've got a rank F power, but it's actually stupid powerful," Iki actually, like, does genuinely have basically nothing. His one special move puts him in bed the day afterwards.
Like, compare that to Shield Hero, where the idea is like, "Oh, he just has a shield. He doesn't even have a real weapon."
Immediately gets a counterattack thing. Like,
yeah, he just gets, like, a shield that eats people and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. And, like...
What if my shield actually had a blade on it? It's not a shield, is it?
Yeah. Like, the entire point is that the system does not want people like Iki to succeed, and the people in charge of the system will actually go out of their way to try and stop him. But then the other people, also within that system, who are themselves fighters, are, like, very quickly cue in, "Oh, this guy's the real deal." Like, when he goes to the big tournament, like, there's that banquet scene where he meets everybody, and he's thinking, like, "Oh, yeah, I can use my status as, like, a rank F to, like, get the surprise on everybody during the fights." And then as soon as he walks in, they're all looking at him, and he's very, like, quickly realizing, "Oh, that's not going to work here. These people understand that the system is stupid and that I am a genuine threat to them."
It's sort of like an allegory for just, like, neurodivergent people in a society that's, like, based around one specific type of thinking.
Yeah.
But we need to move on.
Yeah.
This is not the Chivalry episode. This is just a news item. So, J-Novel Club, check it out. Chivalry of a Failed Knight. The first, like, complete PDF volume's coming out in February. There's no word yet on physicals. Fingers crossed that'll happen, because I really need to see this in Barnes & Noble, man. I really need to just, like, tell people, like, just go get the book. Get the first book, read it, you will understand.
I want to own 3 copies of Chivalry Volume 1.
We don't even have a Japanese one of Volume 1.
I have a digital of the Soul Press version, a physical,
Ah.
and then I want a physical of the J Novel
I
Club
thought you were talking
translation.
about our Japanese
Nope.
volumes. Moving on, though.
Yes.
KonoSuba Season 3, April 2024. We finally have a release date on this.
Finally.
Well, I mean, not exactly, but at least we know the season it's coming out.
It
So,
exists. I wonder if this will cover till the end of the light novels. I'm not sure like how much is left to
no,
adapt.
there's way too much for that.
Okay, alright.
So, if it's like a single core thing like before, it'll probably like cover 2 volumes again. So now we'll end up at volume 7, I believe.
So in a decade, we might get close to the end.
But who knows?
Not
'Cause,
that
like,
I'm in any rush to get to the end of Konosuba for various reasons. I don't like the ending.
we're being such negative Nancy's. At least I'm excited about season 3. Although funnily enough, I never actually ended up watching the movie.
Which means I haven't watched it
because
either.
it came out like when COVID was starting, and like I wasn't sure if I wanted to watch the dub because the dub is really funny for this show. So that just didn't end up happening. I guess now I have a good excuse. I also was not interested in a Megumin show. I think Megumin's like the least interesting character. That'll probably get some people mad at me, or Megumin fans will be like, no, that's understandable. Those are my 2 experiences with Megumin fans. But this is a Darkness household, so there you go. There is more news, but I think if we just move on to the main topic, finally, of the episode, we will get there anyway, which is the current anime season that just ended. I will have to make a proper headline for that later.
The current past season.
The Ghosts of Current Past.
Holy shit, there's too many shows.
There's way too many shows.
I have live chart up on my phone. And
Alright, I'm gonna pull it up too so I can like
God.
see what's going on, but like I used to do this thing where I would watch the first episode of everything.
You poor woman.
I was not alone in this. I would do this with friends. And even though there's a lot of stuff where we would immediately be like, oh, this is gonna be bad, we would check it out anyway because it might be funny. And we would often find a bunch of shows you wouldn't have considered otherwise that turn out to be absolutely brilliant. And a lot of my shows from like my favorites from like the past decade have been like that. I stopped doing it eventually because there were just too many shows. There were already too many shows when I started doing it, and hit edge just increased. Like, you go to live chart with everything turned on, and you will just keep on scrolling for like an hour, and then finally get to the bottom where all the like children's shows for like babies are, because you're sorting by popularity. There's no way that like, obviously not every show is for every single person. Target audiences exist, but still, it feels like it would be almost impossible to watch everything that you're interested in. Case in point, we didn't even get to watch Frieren, the most popular thing that is totally in our like wheelhouse, until yesterday, because there's too many shows. And if you are watching Frieren and you're not watching the Apothecary Diaries, you got screwed because that is totally also in your wheelhouse. I have also not seen more than a few episodes of it yet.
And I'm just really bad at watching shows in general. Yeah, just like looking at this, man, there's so much that is kind of not worth your time. But like, okay. Here's one of my problems with the way anime currently is.
Mm-hmm.
Is so much of it is adaptations.
Right.
Like I like on my phone list, I don't know if it's sorted differently than yours. It's just like Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2, adaptation. Eminence in Shadow Season 2, adaptation. Spy Family Season 2, good show. Frieren, great show, amazing show, adaptation. Zom 100, adaptation.
Okay, to be fair, I have like ongoings turned off, so
Alright,
some of
yeah.
these don't show up for me. Because like Zom 100 was a show that was supposed to air like a season or 2 ago, I think.
Yeah.
And then they got in trouble with the production.
That's just some uncomfortable irony with that show.
It really is. And so like Jujutsu Kaisen is just like, that's been running for a while.
Yeah. Just I would like to see more original stuff, but also I would like people to be pickier with their like with what gets adapted, because it feels almost like any freaking light novel now will sooner or later grab a goddamn adaptation. Like, what is it? Hang on, I gotta scroll down for like the actual title.
We should have
It's
a jingle
like
for that too.
a playthrough of a certain dude. Okay, here we go. A playthrough of a certain dude's VR MMO life. Light novel. Why? Why is this an anime? Who needs this? Like, we don't need this to be animated.
Like even if you like this very specific thing of like, oh, he goes into an MMO and it's a slow life. There's like 5 billion other shows. I'm sure there's others in this season too. Like right next to it, My Daughter Left a Nest and Returned to S-Rank Adventure. That's one of those like fantasy slow life things. It's not an MMO, but it does have RPG stats. It has S-Rank Adventure in the title. Like I don't think there's going to be a super meaningful difference between a lot of these. And, you know, these aren't for us. We don't like this sort of thing to begin with very much. Maybe if it like really does something interesting. But if you're into this, please write in and explain why this is cool, because I'd really love to know.
There is like one slow life show that we both like. I didn't finish it, but that's again because I'm really bad at watching stuff. And we'll get to that when we talk about like upcoming stuff.
Yeah.
Should we talk about specific shows, or do we got more to say about adaptations?
I mean, the adaptation thing is more you. Like, I was curious to hear what you had to say, because
Yeah.
right. Yeah?
So, part of the reason why, like, adaptations bother me, beyond just, like, freaking everything getting an adaptation, which means, you know, there is a finite amount of time, money, and manpower that can be spent making these things. The more adaptations of more things get made, the less you can spend all of those resources on anything else. The other thing is, I freaking hate commercials. And that is what these are. Like, some of them are, like, you know, interested in actually, like, you know, bringing this story to a new medium. Like, you know, as much as neither of us really care for it, Jujutsu Kaisen, that seems like the people making it, when they are not being ground into the dust, seem genuinely interested in, like, actually making that show be a thing for people to enjoy. But then you get, you know, I guess this is the punching bag, a playthrough of a certain dude's VR MMO life, and it's just, hey, here's 12 episodes, buy the novel, consume. And nowhere did this, like, get me as angry as I think earlier in the year, where there was an anime, I think there were 2 or 3 that season, about like a beast tamer person in an RPG world. This one wasn't an isekai, it was just one of those, I got kicked out of the party, but actually my power is super cool, but I'm also a super humble, nice guy, so the people who kicked me out are such colossal jerks. But I will show them, humbly, how cool I am with my awesome power. And watching the first episode of that, I became very keenly aware that there was, like, no artistry in it. Like, none of the people working on it cared. It was entirely made to be a, like, 12 episode long commercial for these light novels. And that made me mad. Because, like, I just thought of, like, people in Japan who, you know, grow up, appreciate the art form, and are like, I want to, like, go into that industry to make that art. And then they get put on a show like that has no ambition, no care. The director was not trying to do anything special with it. I hated it, and I hate it now every time I see something like that. And to an extent, like, a lot of these adaptations are that. Like, even if they're good or trying, it's, at the end of the day, here's 12 episodes, you're not getting any more, go buy the light novel or the manga, you stupid, stupid person. Thank you for consuming our commercial and paying for it.
Yeah, a lot of these, like, if they were directed in a better way, they would at least have that. I saw a thing the other day where someone posted a clip from Hentai, directed by Akiyuki Shinbo of Monogatari fame, and this was like a long time before that. I sadly cannot remember the title of it, but it already had a lot of those hallmarks, and the thesis of that thread was basically, because it's hentai, you might have fewer resources, but there's also no one breathing down your neck to make a super commercial product. So you can kind of go crazy. And then, kind of, what's the phrase? Kind of like get your
Cut loose.
bearings on that. And then once you're in a position to make like an actual commercial thing, you already have that style and it's already proven. And I really wonder if we're seeing like any any people who might go on to do really cool things are just stuck on really bad shows where they're not allowed to do anything. Then again, a lot of the time when someone's like really passionate, it'll still somehow shine through. Like Record of Grand Crest War, which crammed 10 books into 24 episodes.
At one point, we got 2 episodes covering 2 books.
Like,
it's amazing.
This show barely makes sense, really. And there are definitely parts that are not animated very well because they were clearly like thin on resources. But the director was doing his damnedest, and it's a very interesting watch because of that. Yeah. And also, the source material's cool, so...
And, like, some of these, like, of the shows I listed that were some of my favorites, Record of Grand Crest War, Record of Lodos War, Chivalry, those are all adaptations, but they're also very clearly made by people who gave a shit.
Yeah.
And also, for the longest time, that was the only way you were gonna get those stories. Like, we only just got Chivalry Volume 1 beginning to be retranslated again. We only have the first storyline of Lodos translated in English, and there is no English translation, like, official English translation of Grand Crest War. If you want to experience the story of Grand Crest, you gotta watch the anime.
There's also the manga, but it's incomplete, which is really sad because the art is gorgeous.
Never, ever buy a a manga based on a light novel unless you are a super fan, because again, that is only ever going to be a commercial, and they're probably going to cut the thing short when it's only 4 books in, no matter how cool the stuff is going to be.
This would be like a whole topic on its own, but I think it's really interesting how even when something isn't like an adaptation, they'll probably still make a manga and or light novel anyway.
Yeah.
It's like a crossover thing.
Yep.
That said, what was good in this season?
Okay.
I swear to God, we like anime.
Should we just jump right into the big guns?
I mean, usually we might have like a big discussion. What is the show of the season? We might have different opinions, but it's the 100 Girlfriends that really, 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 really love you.
It's so good! Oh my God! I can't believe it! I have, like, I just want to, like, jump right into the last episode because it does something I think is genuinely amazing. And,
Am I allowed to say what the show is first?
Yeah, go for it, yeah. And then I'll jump in and do it. It's polyamory, the anime.
This is how eager he is.
Yes.
It's a harem show, but it's actually a polyamory. There is no, like, who's the winner gonna be? Who's best girl? Because the premise is that this guy has 100 soulmates because God was watching Laputa and got distracted.
Not an exaggeration. That is literally the plot. Like, God was distracted watching Castle in the Sky.
He wrote down the score, which was 100. In the
score he gave the
soulmate.
movie. He's like, this movie's 100 out of 100.
And also, if he doesn't date any of these girls, they will be miserable and die, because that will squander all of the good luck they could have had. And it's great. The main character, Rentaro, is just like the most insanely good-hearted guy. He's like the Batman of love because he's always got a solution to like any problem that could come up. It's not a particularly serious show, you might know. I've been tempted to call it the KonoSuba of harem anime because it's partially a piss take and partially just incredibly good jokes within the genre. But KonoSuba gets mean-spirited sometimes, and 100 Girlfriends never does. At least not so far. If the manga drops off, I don't know about that yet. We've been watching the anime. It's great. Season 2 is already confirmed. That would have been our other headline, but I'm super happy that that's happening. That a show is just really good, and everyone recognizes it, and we're gonna get another season.
Yeah. With that, like, out of the way, the thing I mentioned in the last episode that I thought was, like, just genuinely amazing was, one of the girlfriends, I won't go, like, into too many spoilers, was in a relationship with a boy who died, and she is afraid of loving Rentaro and, like, giving one up. And so Rentaro looks her in the eyes and says, "There's nothing wrong with loving more than one person," which this show is insane. Like, it is out of its gourd. Like, it is madcap and, like, weird at times. But that's, like, one of those things where it's just dropping an actual logic bomb. Like, there are polyamorous people. We are two of them. And...
Are we just dropping that bomb now? Okay.
Are we? I mean, you can edit that out if you want. Whoops. Oh no, our online personalities have been exposed. But yeah, like, that line will probably hit people watching. They'll just, like, take that line in, and maybe not consciously, but in the back of their head, that line will just sit there, and they'll be like, yeah, there is nothing wrong with that. Because a relationship is, even with one person, is just all about, like, communication.
Yeah.
And support. And if you, like, love two people and can communicate clearly with both of them and everyone involved is okay, there's no problem. And I'm like, I can't believe the wacky comedy show dropped a bomb like that, and I don't even think it knew it was.
I think it was, because this is not the only emotional point in the show. It's not all just madcap goofiness.
Yeah.
Like, I started watching this when 3 episodes were out, and I watched the first 2 and I was like, oh, this is super funny. And I got to episode 3 and I started crying. Because, it just... And a lot of shows, I think, you would get... Like, it would be really hard to jump from just being, like, super goofy to being really emotional. And this just pulls that off really well with that. And is able to just make me feel a lot for, like, this character. And I don't know how much I should spoil on this. This is, like, episode 3 of the show. But then Rentaro does, like, such a super heartwarming thing for this character. And I just... It was, like, a really, like, realistic gesture, but still something that you would have to put so much effort into and just be like, this is something I need to do for this person. And I started crying really hard, and then later when I was telling Noth about it, I started crying again.
Yeah, and, like...
Shows that made me cry come out of weird places sometimes.
One of the interesting things about that particular bit, too, is it's a character who... Would you call that a disability?
I would say so. She can't really talk. She can, but she has, like, a big complex about it.
Yeah, and instead of him helping fix her and get her over it, he does a thing that makes it easier for her to communicate with other people. Like, he's just like, I understand, like, your challenges, and I'm not going to invalidate them or quote-unquote fix you, but I have provided a way for you to have an easier time to interact with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very, like, moving and great scene. I love it. And that's just, like, another thing is the show's awareness of just, like, her being like that is not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's just, like, part of her. It understands this very clearly because it shows her mother, like, abusing her and being like, why are you a freak? Why aren't you normal?
Yeah, that hits hard. Also, the directing and the animation are incredible in this. Like, every joke lands really hard, and clearly, like, some people are really enjoying working on this, because there's, like, stuff that's, like, ridiculously extra, and it's just like, you didn't need to do that, but you did, and it makes the show better. Now, this animation studio, Biberi Animation... I don't know if I'm saying that right.
What a name.
Biberi? Biberi.
Yeah.
They've done some other stuff, but nothing that really, like, jumps out as like, oh, of course, those people. So we might be seeing, like the rise of something new. Like, I want to see what these people are gonna do after this.
They animated the Azure Lane tie-in anime, and that explains a lot about how Hawkery is animated in this show.
Oh, have you seen that?
No, but I know what Azure Lane is.
I know what it is.
Yeah, and I'm just like, oh, if you're gonna animate that, of course, okay. All right, kids, cover your ears. They're good. Like, if they did the Azure Lane anime, of course they're gonna be good at drawing really thick girls.
Fair enough. I mean, I was just thinking, like, it's an adaptation of, like, a gacha game, so I didn't I wouldn't expect like any sort of production value on
Yeah,
that, but sure.
I don't want to dwell too much on this, but like the way they animate Hakari is, I'm just like, every other like anime that tries to depict a curvy girl is now going to be like at a horrible disadvantage because they need to match that standard. One more thing about 100 Girlfriends, because we mentioned like the girls aren't like fighting over like Rentaro to be like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm gonna try and be the best. There are some bits where they kind of like compete with one another, but it's in a sort of reasonable way where there's like the one thing where they go to a park and there's a competition, and if you win and you're a couple, the girl gets to put on a wedding dress and take a picture with the guy they're with. And the girls are kind of like, we want to do it. There's only one dress though, so, you know, good game, everybody. Let's do it. Let's give our best.
Mm-hmm.
So there are bits like that, but it's never like it never devolves into just, I'm trying to be the one on top. Yeah, good show. Amazing show.
We should have like a do not disturb light so we can know if we're done with a subject.
Yeah.
Now, 100 Girlfriends, check it out, but we also have to talk about its evil twin from this season.
Oh boy.
Girlfriend. Specifically season 2, but I had not seen season 1 before this. I ended up watching both seasons.
You were really depressed, huh?
Yeah, I watch more anime when I'm depressed, specifically bad anime, which this is. So this is also about polyamory. You know, ostensibly.
Incidental polyamory.
This guy, Naoya, he's like the super earnest guy. Like, he cannot help but shout his emotions at the top of his lungs. Yes, this gets annoying.
And I hope you enjoy that, because that's his only personality trait.
That's not true. He likes bananas, which the show convinced me is a personality trait. But after having confessed to his childhood friend Saki once a month since they were in kindergarten, she's finally accepted. Immediately after this, another girl confesses to him, and she's such wife material that he's like, shit, I want to date her too, and I can't not say that. So he introduces her to Saki, who also admits that she's great wife material. Saki is really obviously bi, which is one of the kind of cool things about the show. But of course she gets really angry when Naoya is like, I want to date both of you, please let me. And then they end up trying it out, and they end up living together because Naoya's parents are just not there for some reason. And you might think that could make for a, you know, kind of grounded compared to 100 Girlfriends thing where it's like, oh.
Sorry.
You might think that leads to something more grounded compared to 100 Girlfriends where, you know, they might actually have to navigate the reality of this situation where these high schoolers are dating each other and there's 3 of them and no one's going to understand that, and how are you going to navigate your life because polygamy is illegal. And it pays some lip service to this, but these characters are so one-note, so cartoony, and the jokes are so hacky that none of it feels realistic or relatable at all. Like, Saki's always pissed and like, beating people up. That's, you know, that classic thing. Nagisa is the only good character in this show. She's just a nice girl who, like, puts a lot of effort into stuff, despite the fact that she's really bad and clumsy at everything. So go Nagisa, you rule. And then this third girl shows up who's a YouTuber, Rika, and she is, I can't use the words I want to use for her, but she is a very bad person. She decides that she has a crush on Naoya for some reason, and just starts constantly, like, you know, trying to, like, get herself in there. She does not want to be in the polycule. She wants him to herself. And I counted 3 times where she knocks Naoya out, kidnaps him, and ties him up. The first 2 times, I'm pretty sure the joke is made of, like, we're gonna call the police, and then for some reason they end up not calling the police. The third time, no one even seems mad after the fact, even though it's, like, maybe the most egregious one. And then there's the fourth girl, Shino. She's Saki's best friend, but she also secretly has a crush on Naoya, so she's torn, and also she thinks polyamory is immoral. And her thing is that she's always tripping on Naoya and like pushing her boobs on him, or like he walks in on her naked. And to the show's credit, it doesn't really blame Naoya. It's not one of those. But it's like this weird curse she has. Like it's not even like a built-in character trait where like situations like this might occur. It just happens to her constantly. I can't stand anyone in this show except for Nagisa. I hate it. I don't know why I watched 2 seasons of it, because it got worse. Season 1 had some things where like some jokes were like pretty well done, where like they're able to lean into how over the top Naoya is, and that he'll like never give up, but very quickly start to realize that his only trick is yelling very loudly until people understand that he's very earnest. This is the shonen trick. It gets old faster than it does in basically any shonen battle series. And it doesn't even really seem like it's about polyamory, because they constantly refer to it as two-timing, and even though the idea is like, oh, I want to make both of these girls happy, that's what I want to do in life now, it still makes it seem like there's supposed to be a winner, a singular winner. And even in an interview with the author, he's like, I had this great idea. What if I did a harem thing, but there wasn't a winner at the end? And yet he is still constantly like making it seem like that's the way it is. And once again, I'm not talking about anything that happens later on in the manga. This is purely the anime, which covers a good chunk of manga material, I'm pretty sure. Like, what was it, like 10 volumes in 2 seasons or something?
I think that was what you told me, yeah.
That based on, like, chapter titles and stuff, because I didn't look too much into the manga, but good God, it is in parts odious. Like, it just feels kind of hateful towards everyone, and to you for watching it, so don't watch that one. Some people like that it is just like complete brain rot. I don't get it.
I did not watch the show myself. Like, not like, unless I was in the room with Rosie and she was watching it and I was in a position where I could see her laptop screen, then I watched it. And it really is this sort of like almost there writing, where the author almost gets like what it is they are making. Like just the whole like I like both of these girls and I want to date them both. And it's just like, okay, cool. And the whole like two-timing thing could start with them being like, you know, that could have easily started with like the way they like look at it at first, where it's like, oh, he's two-timing, but everybody involved is okay with it. And then as this keeps going, they realize, like, well, is this even really two-timing then? What is this actually? Like, this is just, like, the lens through which we have to view this relationship we're all in. And then gradually figuring out, oh, wait, no, there's this thing called polyamory, and that's more accurate to what we're trying to do. But for every, like, good thing it does, it really did seem to me like it was just accident, like, it was falling into it totally by accident. And everything else, it was just, like, he wanted to tell a story where what if all of the girls could win, but the only way he knew how to write the story was still having them try and compete with one another until the end. And what a disappointment, especially like Naoya, because the thing that makes 100 Girlfriends work is how awesome Rentaro is and how you will believe that like he could get all of these different girls to fall for him. Naoya is just such an anti-charisma vacuum. Not helped by the fact that he has literal, like... So if you call somebody an NPC in real life, you're not worth talking to. But when I'm talking fictional characters, Naoya has an NPC design. Like, he looks like somebody you stumble across in the school hallway when you're playing a Persona game. And he has about as much personality to him. Where all it is just like the shouting and allegedly the banana thing. I personally haven't seen it, so to me, he literally only has is loudly earnest as a personality.
Oh, by the way, I was supposed to put up pictures of all these things we were talking about.
Well, that's what the edit is for, honey.
Yeah. Here's girlfriend.
And fake Edelgard, who I don't think we talked about.
Yeah, I did.
Oh,
I talked about her.
All right. I gotta listen better. But yeah, it's just like every good thing that happens in Girlfriend is entirely accidental, and it is a colossal disappointment. Like, there's a genuinely good concept there, and I do wish we had, a sort of halfway point between this bad show and the good show 100 Girlfriends, but that one is totally insane, and I would like something just, a little bit more grounded in reality, where it's the people being like, maybe we're poly. Maybe everybody is into everybody. That would be a good show.
Yeah.
100 Girlfriends is not that.
There's this weird trend in anime, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it might be about something that's considered taboo, whether by normies or by most people, and it'll be kind of tsundere for that concept by being like, oh, they're doing this thing, oh, it's so bad. I certainly don't condone this sort of thing, and maybe even the characters in the show will act like that while still constantly like indulging in that. Now, there's nothing really morally wrong with polyamory, but you will see this a lot in like shows where like the thing is like lowly stuff, and then you'll have a guy constantly be like, I don't like lowlies, why do all these lowlies keep gravitating towards me? Or I don't like my sister, I certainly don't want to boink my sister, why do these like siscon things keep happening to me? You may be able to tell which specific shows I'm talking about here, but if you buy into that and you're not into that specific thing, you might end up very disappointed. And it kind of feels like Girlfriend's kind of doing that, where it's like, oh, I'm not really into polyamory, except in this case, it kind of is. It's very strange.
Yeah, it's like they have to play it off as a joke. Because otherwise, then they'll be like, ooh, breaking a taboo. And I will say, because it's not going to come up, so I'm just going to work it in real quick. Any anime that is based on, like, oh, what if we, like, break a taboo? It's always breaking it, like, the most vanilla normie taboos possible. And it's not actually going to do anything, like, really thrillingly transgressive.
Mm-hmm. That said, let's talk about more cool things that are cool.
Yes.
Other shows I watch. You didn't really watch that much this season,
Nope.
did you? So I'm just going to have a quick rundown of some of these so that I'm not the only one talking constantly.
Well, I can interject. I have, like, comments here and there.
My new boss is Goofy. I quite like this show. It's an interesting show in that it's got this slice of lifey vibe, and it's just kind of slow paced and like nice, and all these like just normal. It actually uses the word healing a bunch. It is a healing anime, but you also get to see the main characters like like traumatic backstory a bunch. So it's not purely just like, let's sit down for 25 minutes and just let the vibes wash over me. Like, there's this actual thing where the main character, Momose, he quit his job because his boss was abusive and just like absolute psycho stuff here. And he started this new job, and he's got all of this anxiety. He's got like a stomach ulcer because of his stress. But his new boss is super nice, and also just, well, he is goofy, as the title says. I don't know if goofy's the right word. He's more like very absent-minded. He does a lot of like funny things, like he'll start drinking from a can and then realize he didn't open it, that sort of thing, and it's just always kind of adorable. This show is also pretty gay. Like, there's not like an explicit like gay romance, and like there's not like, oh, we're gonna go into a relationship, but in every other sense it really is that. And at first I wanted to compare it to like the sort of thing that kind of like teases Yuri, where it's like, oh, these girls are totally into each other, but it'll never like go anywhere because it's not actually made for lesbians to watch. It's made for guys who still want to have to be able to fantasize that they can get those girls. This is not that, though. It's not really like, oh, it's actually for straight women to fantasize about these guys, because there's too much romantic development for that, because they end up living together, and it ends up being a whole arc that, like, it's a circumstance thing where he's supposed to move in temporarily, and then it ends up being like, I really like this life living with him. There's also a really cute cat who's a tsundere. He's great.
I haven't watched this. I have heard you watch it, and like just hearing it, the show like radiates comfiness.
Mm-hmm.
And just like from what I heard of like, the show and what you told me, it feels like that all that like romantic development you said, it feels just very natural.
Yeah.
Like not to get into this whole thing, but there's characters that are gay characters, and then there's characters that are characters who are gay. And this
Right.
just feels like they weren't trying to set out to be like, we're gonna write a gay story. It was, this is the story they wrote, and it's gay.
There is another character who shows up, Kinjo, and he shows up partway through. He also had like an abusive boss, but it was a different sort of situation. It's kind of cool how they like contrast, like, okay, this guy was just an absolute psycho. This other guy may have meant well and just didn't realize what was going on. But Kinjo is bisexual, openly so. He has had relationships with women and men. So I feel like that's the show kind of saying, like, we're not afraid to acknowledge that gay people exist. It's just, this isn't necessarily where that's going, like, explicitly here. The fourth character is the Chief. I don't really like the Chief, because his one joke is that, like, people don't want to hang out with him. Like, he's lonely after his wife divorced him, and that sucks, but it's like, his one thing is that he will interject in a conversation and be like, no one wants to do that with me. And then someone will take pity on him and be like, I'll do that with you. And then he's like, yay! That's literally the only joke. And it's weird, because there's one episode where he turns out to just be, like, a really good, guy who, like... God, what's the word? When you're at a party and you have, like, the one specific guy who, like, creates the atmosphere.
The life of the party?
Yeah, I guess that. He turns out to be that, where he's got this really good comedy routine. And it's just like, why wasn't he like that throughout the rest of the show? But it doesn't, like, ruin the show or anything. I thought it was pretty good. I give it, like, a 7, I think.
I don't think I've seen anything with, like, the Chief when you were watching, but I will just say, like, I am immensely disappointed that they named a character the Chief, and he's not just, like, a parody of, like, the Chiefs from police shows. Like, you're out of line!
No, I mean, he has a name. His title at the company is that he's the Chief. I just forgot what his actual name is, because everyone calls him Chief. My next... no, not that. I'm in love with the Villainess. This is kind of my problem.
Yeah.
This has already become a played-out trope. Being reincarnated in an Otome game and either being the Villainess, or being in love with the Villainess, or it's not literally an Otome game, but it's basically like, I'm Marie Antoinette, and this is gonna be bad. I thought this was alright. I always, appreciate, like, explicit gay representation. Your mileage may vary on how good it is, because Rei can be very overbearing, and while that does get addressed somewhat, it kind of feels like the show is doing the thing of, like, yes, we know that she's being problematic. We will now proceed to have her act like that anyway. But I was generally enjoying it up until it started, like, trying to be serious. Because the main character, Rei, she's reincarnated into this Otome game, and you're supposed to romance the princes. She doesn't care because she's gay. She wants the villainess, Claire, who is, like, an Ojo. You can see her picture right there.
She's the
Fortunately,
blonde.
Rei is also a masochist, so this works out for her. But the actual overall story of the game is supposed to be that a revolution happens. The commoners rise up, and this ends badly for Claire. Rei obviously wants to prevent this. But then once that actually starts happening, it shifts very strangely, and I don't think that's where the show's strengths are. And it also betrays that the solution is always Rei has, like, Rei has no life this game. She's read the strategy guide and memorized it. So the solution is always, oh, I knew that was going to happen, so I already took advantage of something earlier. Like, oh, I knew this strong monster was going to show up as, like, an event, so I made sure to, like, grind my magic specifically so that I could do that. And then it's like, oh no, it's a scripted event, which is kind of funny. But in this case, this whole thing happens where, like, the school they're at gets infiltrated, and then Rei just kind of rattles off a bunch of, like, backstory for these characters who turn out to be the bad guys. And clearly that's supposed to be an interesting reveal in the game, but Rei already knows this, so she just, like, she just like barfs all that information onto them. It's just like, where the hell did this come from? And I don't think it really super recovers well from that. I can't really compare it to the light novel because Seven Seas infamously botched Volume 1 by removing Ray's realization that she is acting in a problematic manner. Seven Seas, I don't know if this is like a specific editor or like a weird company policy, but they've had several times where someone's like pointing out like, hey, you just removed stuff from the Japanese. And, you know, these have been like different like instances of it. Like I think a lot of people were upset about Mushoku Tensei, and other people were like, well, I like it if the main character isn't a pedophile, so I'm cool with that. And then here's this one where they try to like make the gay character look better, but then make her look worse because she's not aware that she's doing bad things. They got like caught for that, and they said like, oh, we'll reissue this. I never saw second printing in stores of this, so I don't want to start reading with Volume 2. I also don't know if they'll end up doing this kind of crap again, so
Yeah.
very annoying. But the anime is always what betrays it, because you can't fuck with the anime too much. You can put things into subtitles. I don't think I've ever really seen an instance of a localizer in subtitles like deliberately changing something, because you can't really get away with it because you can hear the Japanese and you can't change the animation or anything like that. I know there's a big like, oh, those corrupt localizers kind of thing.
Ignore those people.
In subtitles, it's definitely very overblown. And a lot of the times there have been this really bad faith or straight up lying where some guy's like, I'm Japanese and it didn't say that character was trans. It did, and that person didn't speak Japanese.
I think I know the exact thing you're talking about, too.
That was Zombieland Saga.
Really?
Yeah?
Oh, I thought you were talking about your Wikipedia saga.
Oh, God.
Sorry to bring that back up.
Don't remind me of the Wikipedia wars.
The only thing I saw of In Love with the Villainess is the clip that got floated around Twitter where they, like, explicitly are like, no, this person is gay and they will never be attracted to men, and they like actually have to sit down and explain, you know, lesbians for dummies.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, did that get all of the worst people angry.
I saw like one person angry and their point was so dumb I couldn't be sure if it wasn't a troll. Which is kind of what happens on Twitter nowadays, but
Yeah.
they were basically like, it used to be Yuri, now it's gay. And I'm like, huh? What?
Alright, so what do you got next?
The Demon Sword Master of Excalibur Academy. Where do I have that?
What did you call this one? Demon Nibble?
Demon Swibble Mibble.
Demon Swibble Nibble. Because fuck these names.
Because our close friend Eve pointed out that this guy doesn't even use a sword for half the show. She was just like, well, how is he a Demon Sword Master? And I'm like, I'm sure that's something that's going to come up. And it does. It's a big plot point. But she was just like, you can't call it Sword Master if he doesn't use a sword for half the show. I was very depressed. I don't usually watch this sort of thing, but I'm just like, I'm in the mood for something kind of trashy. And I was, in part, pleasantly surprised by this, because it seems like there's, like, at least some thought put into this world. Where it's, you know, it deals with colonialism. And just like, oh yeah, the humans in this setting are, like, the jackasses. And basically the main character, he was the big demon lord, and he does the whole thing of like, oh, you might defeat me now, but I'll come back in 1,000 years. And then he does, but it goes wrong, and now he's a little boy, and the Shota stuff is weird, and I wish it wasn't here. Because it's one of those plausible deniability things we talked about, where it's like, I can't tell if this is like making fun of that, or if it's just being that. Especially because the main girl, who is really obviously like the reincarnation of the person he's looking for, but he somehow doesn't put this together, even though she has almost the exact same name. Like, he turns her into a vampire because they ripped off the beginning of Hellsing. And when you have a vampire and their thrall, it's kind of inherently a sexual thing. This is a little boy, even if he is like 1,000 years old or whatever. So it's weird. but I still generally enjoyed that first arc, and there's some genuinely good, like, yeah, I'm motivated to like see him fight for her and like see her like self-actualize because she has trouble with her powers. Because basically, like, the past was a classic fantasy setting, and the present is a generic battle high school light novel setting. And again, I can't tell if that's an intentional joke or if that's just let me do both these things. But there's like too much interesting stuff for me to write it off completely, but it's also not very good, and definitely like, just take some like specific elements just because that's what you do in a genre where it's like, oh, you have this battle high school light novel. Who's the first bad guy gonna be? Rapey guy. It's always a rapey guy, and it's a rapey guy here, and it's really weird because this rapey guy, his power is that he can just like brainwash people, and he uses this to brainwash a bunch of women at the school. No one seems to have a problem with this. And I actually like checked out the light novel because I wanted to know if they just like skipped something there to explain it. And it's like they vaguely mentioned that he's like a viscount, so I thought like, oh, it's gonna be like he's rich, so he doesn't need to care about the law or whatever. That never comes up. They just mention that once. And also they're like, oh, it's okay. Those women all consented to that. But at the same time, he's trying to get the main girl to be in his brainwashed harem by, doing like a big bet or whatever and being like, if you lose, then you have to. That's not really. I don't know if that really counts as consent. And also, he's like groping them in public. Don't do that. Even if you're in like a BDSM relationship, don't do that. Anyway, he loses, and then his weapon explodes, and then he's gone forever, I guess. But how the hell was no one like? No one points out that this is fucked up, and I'm not censoring that F-bomb because it's fucked up.
The thing with like these,
it feels like they're not thinking about these things.
The thing with like the rapey guy light novel villains, right, is that in a lot of cases they are the only like. They're like the only person actively seeking out sex.
Mm-hmm.
The main character will get into one like air quotes sexy situation after another. He'll trip and fall and see some panties or grab a boob or whatever. But he'll always like when somebody actively proposes sex, he'll flee from it. And so the only like male character who seems to be like actively interested in sex is a goddamn predator. And that's if the show is interested in sex at all. And there's plenty of shows that are like pretty thoroughly freaking sexless until you need a rapey guy who shows up.
It's weird because the main character has a vampiric thrall and he's not the rapey guy interested in sex.
Yeah. I actually picked up the light novel of this once when we were at Barnes & Noble.
Of this series?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I picked it up and I was just like, oh yeah, this art looks kind of cool. Let me flip through it. And then I got to like one illustration that made it clear the main character was a Shota. Closed the book, put it back on the shelf, never looked back. I'm not into Shotas. Somehow I'm enjoying Xenoblade 2, though.
I feel like in Xenoblade 2, like Rex's character gives you a lot of like plausible deniability.
Yeah.
In that. You could just be like, oh, he's short.
He is.
And people call him a kid because they're being dicks, because they always are whenever that gets brought up.
Yeah, like he's 15 and immediately establishes like, Nia makes her like early, like in their first scene almost, Nia makes a remark at Rex's expense and he wastes no time firing back.
Anyway, this is not a gaming podcast. This is the anime podcast. So yeah, I'm very mixed on this one. I haven't finished it yet because once again, there's too many shows. I would like for it to be good, and I do like the imagery used for like the vampire powers. And I wish that the show was just more of that. There is, of course, Frieren. We mentioned this, that we just did not have time to watch it until yesterday. We've watched 3 episodes now. I'm certainly looking forward to more. It's very heartfelt. It's well made. It's well animated. Even though a couple parts I was like, oh, that's CG. And then I found out that there's this whole thing where there's a scene later, a big dance scene, and everyone was like, "Oh, that's CG," and then it turns out it wasn't CG, and also it wasn't mocapped, even though the dancers they used for the reference footage, which is not rotoscoped, were wearing mocap gear. And now I'm just confused because why would you hand draw a scene with that many frames and make it look like it's CG? Because it's not even only the movement. The movement has like that weird stiffness to it in certain cuts that makes you think, oh, that's CG. But also like the shadows, there's like this weird cell shading thing, like they are ND 3D models that you would never really do normally if you're just hand drawing a scene. You wouldn't even be, because then you'd have to make a choice about, do I put a shadow there? There's no reason to do it, so don't do it. But there's a shadow there now. I have no idea what the process here is, and I know this specific animator has done other things that don't look like this, but also they've done a bunch that just do look like this. I think the end result is what matters, and the end result is I'm kind of taken out of it sometimes because I'm like, oh, that looks like CG.
I watched that clip. Oh my god, it fired off so many neurons in my head because I'm a sucker for like romantic situations. And there's a scene where it's between Fern and a character we haven't met yet, who I know is named Stark. And there seems to be a scene where, like, during the dance, Fern literally swoons. And God, that did things to my romance brain. I was just like, oh. And that was the point I think I was just like, okay, I gotta watch.
So I don't know if there's any point in us explaining the story of Frieren because everyone else has already seen this show and we're late to the party.
Yeah, we should.
It's about an elf. She was in an adventuring party that defeated the demon lord as you do, and she doesn't really realize that, you know, her time with her party members is limited because she's so much more long-lived than they are. So she's like, "Oh, I'll stop by later." And then 50 years pass and the party leader is now an old man on his deathbed. And then she has to start realizing like how precious time really is, even if you have this super long lifespan. And it sort of becomes this journey of trying to like rectify that she never got to know him that well.
Yeah. She ends up like going to meet like the priest of the party, who is also an old man now, because she's just like, oh, I kind of want to like, you know, spend time with him while I still can.
Mm-hmm.
And he has this little girl he's adopted named Fern, and he's just like, hey, could you take her with you on your travels? And she's just like, no, because like, you know, apprentice mages don't have like, you know, a great mortality rate. I'm not, you know, gonna do that to her. He's like, all right, that's fair enough. Hey, here's this book. Can you translate it? It'll take 6 to 7 years. And also in your free time, can you teach her how to be a mage? And, you know, before he passes away, in the time it takes for her to translate the book, Fern becomes like a full mage, and she's just like, oh, you bastard. You planned that. So it becomes Frieren and Fern traveling, and it has like really interesting thoughts about like the passage of time in general and what that means for Frieren, but also for fantasy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like the third episode we watched is called Killing Magic. And Frieren and Fern go to this village where Frieren, during her adventuring days with the hero Himmel, sealed a demon who had like the ultimate offensive magic. And so he comes out and he, you know, he's just like, oh, hey, I'm free. Cool. Round two? Round two. And shoots an attack at Frieren, who has Fern defend it. And then afterwards, Fern is just like, you hyped this guy up, but that was just average, ordinary, offensive magic. And Frieren explains to the guy, yeah, it's been like decades and decades. Like the humans started like evaluating your magic and reverse engineered it. Time has advanced. Mm-hmm. Magic has advanced. You are no longer like exceptional. They have figured your stuff out. And I thought that was like really interesting. I'm very seldom like interested in like world building. World building, I think, is supposed to be like spices that supplement the meal.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was like a very good seasoning they added to like the story that Frieren is going through.
Yes. I agree. Can I talk about that?
Sure.
So you have these like big time skips at the beginning, obviously, to illustrate that Frieren is not, you know, she's taking this time for granted. So between Himmel's death and her meeting Fern is 20 years. And after that whole killing magic thing, it just made me think, like, think of, like, any 20-year gap in, like, from, like, the beginning of the 20th century to now. Imagine if that just, like, passed in a blink of an eye.
Mm-hmm.
And how different it would be. Because she goes back to, like, the town where well, that was a 50-year gap, I think. But she, like, goes back to where Himmel lives, and she's like, oh, this has changed. And it's like, yeah, imagine just... You go to a place in 1950, and then you kind of lose track of time, and you come back in the year 2000, you know? Or 1900 to 1950, but even just like 1950 to 1970, 1970 to 1990. Huge difference, right?
Yeah.
And I think by illustrating that time, the passage of time does change technology in this world, or, you know, magic would... It's basically equivalent here.
Mm-hmm.
Because often in fantasy settings, it's easy to be like, oh, well, you know, things didn't used to advance that quickly. So you can be like, oh, 100 years ago, the Demon Lord was sealed, and then 100 years pass, and everything looks the damn same. And you're like, sure.
We've switched from iron to steel.
But here, that's not the case. And I really... That world building really illustrates, like, yes, the passage of time relates to... Like, it's sort of realistic. Like, consider this in your real life.
This is, like, going back to, like, my way too lengthy introduction, when I said, like, I really like things that are aware of their themes, this is absolutely one of those stories that is about things.
Yeah.
Like, it's about the passage of time and what that does to people and the world around us, and how important it is to, like, understand and, you know, cherish that time with people and get to know them. And I am so excited to see where it goes. Like, we're only 3 episodes in. Can't wait for more. We have a bunch to get through.
That means that technically we haven't even seen the initial drop yet.
No, we haven't, yeah.
Because they dropped 4 episodes of the show when it came out. And I don't think that was, like, announced in advance. I think they were just like, boop.
Mm-hmm.
If they did, I missed it. But people immediately compared that to Oshi no Ko having, like, its what was it, 80-minute premiere?
Yeah.
And you really needed it for that story to, like, really explain, like, okay, this is what this is about. You need this runtime. Frieren still, like, splits itself into, like, normal episodes, but I do see why they did it this way. Because it needs to establish a lot. You can't just, like, slide through all of that setup, because then you wouldn't understand why the passage of time is so important.
Yeah, I don't think if they just showed 1 episode, it really would have sunk into people what this show was about and what makes it so good.
Yeah.
So I think that was, like, the absolute right call, and I think it's just going straight into a second core, which is super cool and unusual. Like, the youngins might not remember this, but they used to make anime that would be like, here's 50 episodes, and it's airing, like, 1 week at a time with no breaks.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of miss it.
Yeah, I don't mind split cores because, you know, anything that lightens the production load is good. I don't know if that works out in practice because so many of these studios will still just pump out garbage upon garbage upon garbage. But in theory, I think it's really good to do shows as seasons so that you have time to breathe. And if it's an adaptation, you have time to wait for the arc to end. So you're not like, you don't have to spend 10 episodes on Super Saiyan Goku fighting Frieza anymore.
Yeah.
That's a thing of the past.
Like, they announced...
Except for One Piece.
They announced, like, the next season of, like, My Hero Academia, which is going to cover, like, the final arc. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, how is that going to work? Because that's still ongoing. Like, we're down to, you know, spoilers for the manga, we're down to 1 major villain standing. So maybe it won't last that much longer, but who knows? So, and, like, it has every chance of just, like, that season's going to end in the middle of a fight.
Mm.
And that's probably not going to be super satisfying.
I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see.
Do we have more to say about Frieren?
I don't think so yet. I'm definitely just looking forward to it.
Yeah, I have one incredibly petty, very me nitpick about Frieren.
Oh.
And it's that I hate Himmel's haircut.
Well, that's okay, he's dead.
Yeah.
And also, you know, he's set up as being, like, kind of this dweeb who's just like, oh, I'm so handsome.
Yeah.
And Frieren, like, you know, posthumously calls him out on this behavior.
Yeah.
It's... The whole setup of... it being about realizing that you didn't get to spend enough time with someone hits me pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
But I like that it's like, okay, some of these memories are just like, yeah, remember that time they were being a cock?
Yeah.
I think that's great. I think that's very realistic.
Yeah. All right, what do we got?
I tried watching a lot of stuff. Some of it I'm just still not all the way through, so I don't think there's any point in me being like, hey, I'm 6 weeks behind on this show. Let me tell you my thoughts. So we can save that for a future episode. However, next we have the upcoming anime season. Because the train don't stop rolling, and by this time next week we'll probably be like, oh yeah.
Maybe sometimes the train should take a break, but
Yeah, but we can't stop the train.
Can't stop the gravy train.
The train is unstoppable. So once again, I went through all of Live Chart's chart and started to figure out what am I going to watch, what am I not going to watch. I had to be a little harsher this time because I realized there's just too much. Even if I'm interested in like, I grabbed like 14 shows of last season. It's not possible.
I cannot believe what the top one is, but we can talk
Solo
about that
Leveling.
Later.
I'm not watching that one.
Neither am I. All I remember is like I know people have sworn up and down to me like, no, this is the good one, which I've heard so many times about so many bad things I don't believe in anymore. But I do remember they put out that promotional image where it's like, he's the weakest, now he's the strongest, and somebody on Twitter, I can't remember who, just like quote tweeted it with and just said, big shoved in a locker energy.
It's also by A1 Pictures, so I'm not expecting like a great adaptation or anything that'll make me go, whoa! Because even Mushoku Tensei, which I loathe, I had to admit it was very pretty.
Yeah.
But I do have some things that I am looking forward to. Do you have anything?
Yes. Some of these overlap, so I might just like pick one and dive right into it. Tales of Wedding Rings. Please be good. Please be good.
I've been reading the manga. I quite like it. It's kind of basic bitch, and like indeed, it is an isekai. It is a harem. I don't inherently hate these things, but this is like fairly good. It even has like a kind of generic protagonist, but I don't mind because it's all really good natured, and there's. You even get like, oh, the princess gets jealous. The first one gets jealous of the other ones, and she's like, no, I want to like be first to do the sexies with him, but also I'm scared to do the sexies with him. It's all about execution. There are some really good jokes. It makes you feel like there is a progression, even if it is going slowly. The boobs are incredible. There's no way, no other way I can say that.
I have flipped through the manga. She is not lying.
Like, there's a reason most of these volumes are shrink wrapped at Barnes and Noble. Now the anime doesn't look that great. It looks very cheap. It looks like one of those where it's like, oh, we'll do this cool shot, but we're not very good at it. The studio has done like 3 other things, and at least one of them is straight up porn. It's one of those porn ones where they just put it out online. So I am trepidatious about this, and it's really annoying that when something where you like the source material gets an anime and it doesn't look good. And it's the same problem with Unnamed Memory, which will be coming up later in the year. Where it's just like, this deserves to look awesome, and it doesn't really.
Unnamed Memory, I'll put it right out there. I think that deserves Mushoku Tensei money.
There you go. There you have it.
But yeah, like, I'm excited for Tales of Wedding Rings because it's like Chivalry, in that it's taking a lot of these tropes you've seen before, and then the author was just like, hey, what if I thought about what I was writing for like 3 minutes, and how much better does that make the story? And this sounds like really underhand and facetious. I've actually read some spoilers about where the manga is going to go, and I'm like, oh, that's actually really interesting. I can't believe they're writing this kind of story and pulling a trigger on that. Good stuff.
I'm like 4 volumes in. I really got to catch up, but like,
yeah,
buying manga and like buying big stacks of manga, like that adds up. So
I mean, we do have an Amazon gift card from Christmas.
This is true.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's move on to the next show.
yeah, I am looking forward to Dangers in My Heart Season 2, and Banished from the Heroes Party Season 2, and Urusei Yatsura Season 2. Season 2s of things you like are an easy bet.
I can talk about 2 of those, because I've seen parts of them. I have not seen Dangers in My Heart Season 2.
Well, you haven't seen Season 2, it's not out yet.
I mean, yeah, Season 1. I've heard about it through you, and it's, like, interesting in that just hearing about it, it should be, like, these characters are all red flags. Like, if you knew these people in real life, you'd kind of be like, that person's a red flag, but, like, it works.
Here's the thing about anime charts, right? You can't trust posters and you can't trust blurbs, and that's why you have to try the shows out, because if we had just trusted posters and blurbs, we never would have seen Chivalry of a Failed Knight. We skipped that one. We saw a certain famous review of it, and we're like, this is awesome. Well, I saw that. You had read the manga, I think?
Yeah, so the way I got into Chivalry was, and this is something of a story, I read a lot of TV tropes, and I was reading around, and I was sick and tired of anime just being like, hey, here's the obvious couple who won't get together until, like, maybe the last 30 seconds of the last episode. Tired of that. Exceptionally exhausted. And so TV tropes sold me on SAO, and it's just like, it doesn't do that. He gets with the girl right away. She sticks around, and they're both cool. And that was a goddamn lie. Because, you know, like, that first book of SAO, I actually read the fan translation before there was even an official one. And I liked it quite a bit. And then I extremely skimmed through volumes 2 through 4 and gradually realized what they were about and didn't even finish the Gun Gale arc. Because it was just like, yeah, we rescued Asuna, and now she can be in the plot and do cool things again. Where is she? Mm-hmm. So I gave up on it. And then somehow I found out about Chivalry and read the manga for that. Not the whole thing, but just enough that when you got into it, like, I knew what you were talking about. And then watching it, I was like, oh my god, this is what SAO was sold to me as. If you liked SAO, or like the idea of Kirito and Asuna being a cool couple, get into Chivalry, please.
But that's the thing. The blurb of Chivalry only tells you Iki Gurugane is like the weakest guy at the battle high school, but he's actually strong, and then he gets a princess. Yeah. Ever heard this one before?
And here's the thing.
Frieren's still up there.
What gets me about those blurbs is they're all terrible. Even, like, the good shows, the blurbs are terrible because it almost is never, like, you know, what you would read on the back of a book to get you interested. It just sort of, like, explains some basic lore things to you, and then it's just like, that's interesting, right? And I'm like, no, what's the hook? Why should I care?
And sometimes blurbs try to give you a vibe, but it's translated really literally and badly, so you don't actually get any vibe.
Yeah,
And to get back to Dangers in My Heart, you know, it's about, like, this, it's like a boy meets girl in high school thing, but the thing is, the boy is like, one of these days, I'm gonna show up to school, I'm gonna stab the fuck out of everyone, because he can't get a gun in Japan. And it's like, oh no, that's not what I want. Is this gonna be one of those, like, is this gonna be, is this gonna be Ari Ferretta, you know? Especially because he specifically hates the class beauty because she's pretty and popular. Don't be this guy. I know that if you're a teenager in high school, you might be tempted to be this guy, but don't be that. But the show fairly quickly pivots from that as, you know, he actually interacts with the girl, and it turns out that, like, actually, like, he's not, like, that bullied. He's just kind of, like, bringing this on himself. He's, like, you know, doing the classic, like, pushing people away so they can't push you away kind of thing. And the knife doesn't even show up after a few episodes. The knife that he brings to school. And he turns out to be a pretty good guy. Like, within a few episodes, he's, like, helping classmates just because he's like, oh, I don't like seeing them in trouble, so I'm gonna help them. And it's not perfect. The main girl is, like, you know, she's one of those where it's like, yeah, she's pretty and she's a model and all that shit, but also she's a dumbass. And she's constantly, like, eating food in the school library. And that's, like, a joke that comes back way too much, is that she, like, likes stupid food that you shouldn't be eating. But by the end, I was just very charmed by it. Like, it just does it really well, with, like, this the change in this character. And I thought that, that season was just going to be the only thing. So I was very happy to hear that there's going to be a season 2, and we're even going to get a spin-off animated. I don't know how much romantic development there's going to be, because, generally when the main thing is the romance, you're going to end up with the problem of, well, if they get together, the story's over.
Lies!
Unless, unless you do some contrived bullshit, or you're actually able to write something interesting about navigating a relationship.
Which, okay, I have a thing to say about that, right?
Oh, no.
Because most of these are adaptations, and we could probably do a whole goddamn podcast just on this topic. So many of these things are adapted from, light novels, which are themselves adapted from web novels. And those web novels are written by amateurs. No quality control to post on, these websites.
Mm-hmm.
But they'll get, ripped off and, edited just a tiny bit to become a light novel. And for a lot of them, I genuinely think the authors do not have a lot of, experience in relationships. So they do not want to write that. That, or the wish fulfillment the wish fulfillment aspect is such that, a girl liking you is within the realm of believability for wish fulfillment, but actually dating the girl would be a bridge too far and break the immersion.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is, really, really unfortunate for, some series that could have been genuinely amazing if they just kept going. The first 4 episodes of Shield Hero are amazing. And it's, very clearly, despite, the weirdness of Raftalia being, a child thing when she meets Naofumi, it's very clearly, putting them on a path that will meet and become, a romantic thing. And then the second volume syndrome kicks in, and the author's like, I can't write that. So they slam the brakes on that development forever. And that's really unfortunate. And the thing that gets me is, this isn't just Japanese media. A lot of Western media will do the stupid will they, won't they thing. And I promise you, one of the most, famous sitcoms ever is Friends. And I'm pretty sure the most popular relationship in that entire show is Chandler and Monica. And it will shock you how early they get together in the show. And how they do not ever break up. Which really does just put the lie to the whole thing of people aren't interested in that. The relationship ends there. And also, as somebody in a relationship, getting together is the easy part. Rant over. We'll talk about that some other podcast.
Yeah. The weird thing is, Danger's in My Heart, it's not really oh, will they, won't they? Because the only thing is, they haven't said it. But they pretty much are a couple, and they're dating, in every other aspect. This right here, on Live Chart, it says the genres are comedy, romantic subtext, and school. And that person hasn't watched the show or read the manga, because there ain't no subtext about any of this. It's a romance show that is also a comedy.
Yeah.
And it does some kind of interesting things with gender roles, because main character ends up, reading this shoujo manga and getting really into it, and it ends up having this parallel to what is actually going on with him in his life and his romantic interest. And when the parallel comes to a head, he is the equivalent of the girl character. He's the heroine in that situation. He's not the guy. He's also drawn like a girl. I don't know if you've heard of this, but if you look at an anime character in a profile view, you'll notice that girls are not humans, they're actually cats. They have snouts, and that is how he is drawn. So I feel like this is all very intentional. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. And then, speaking of romance, Banished from the Heroes Party Season 2.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know how we've talked about, shows that take tropes that are tired and boring and then, had 3 minutes of thinking about them? Here's one of them.
You know how we were talking about shows that are badly animated, but they deserve better?
Yeah.
Here's one of them.
Yeah.
Season 1 was a fairly ugly show, except when they do Sakuga on the main girl, which... Sure. Fair enough.
I can live with that.
But it generally was not a show that looks very good. But it's the one slow life that I kind of get, because it just really sells you on the idea of this guy didn't really want to be in the heroes party, And when he's given an excuse by this guy, like, this other dude in the party trying to get rid of him, he kind of just buys into it because he kind of wants to not be in the hero's party. And he's just like, all right, this gives me an out. I am leaving. You're totally right. I shouldn't be here. I'm getting in the way.
Yeah, because he is just like, you're right. I am like, I can't keep up with everybody anymore. So it's time for me to go. He is, in Fire Emblem terms, the Jagan. But like, what makes this one interesting is the relationship he has with Rit. Am I getting the names right?
Yes.
Yeah, because
it's Red and Rit,
which is awkward because so the guy's name is Red, and Red is the name he like takes up because he doesn't want people to know who he is.
And his sister's name's Ruti.
Yeah, and his love interest is named Rit. But what makes this awkward for me to keep track of in my head is one of the predominant colors on Rit's outfit is red.
Oh shit! Yeah, it is.
And so they very clearly like get on the path to being a couple. I didn't finish the first season largely because
they're a couple.
Yeah. I'm terrible. I know what happens in the last episode, but I'm terrible at watching things. You finished it. And what makes it nice is it doesn't feel like, oh, he's exceptionally overpowered and just living the slow life because It's like he goes to this place and it really felt like it was about the community. And like the community is kind of circling around him and his relationship with Rit, which is like the core driving like thematic thing pushing the show forward. And what makes this show like better for me than other slow life stuff is that relationship actually goes somewhere. I have not finished the first season, but I know in the last episode they actually have sex. And it's like they start off very awkwardly, and then I think it's like, don't they start like just playing around and kind of like tickling each other? And then now that they're comfortable, it progresses into like the actual sex, and I'm like, that's a crazy, realistic human thing. And also avoids one of these other silly anime tropes I don't like, where we are so pandering to the male gaze, but also the male can't ever be the one like pursuing the relationship. They need to be told 6 billion times, no, it's okay. I'll have to look up that one tweet that I think is absolutely damning about that for, if we ever talk more about, like, romance.
I think structuring a story when you're, like, surrounded by these cliches is really difficult, and this pulls it off fairly well. Because, Rich shows up, and they've already had their backstory where, like, they were traveling with the princess, and she was being old tsundere, and there was this other girl who was, like, she felt inferior and was like, you should be together with him, but she was like, no, you should be together with him, you're clearly like head over heels. And they meet again in the slow life town and they start living together and they run a shop. And it would be really easy for them to just be like otherwise a formality, but this backstory comes out gradually and it feels like, these are memories of when we were younger and now we're older. So it could be like a situation of like, what do you do after the Demon Lord's defeated? But the Demon Lord's not defeated. Red just quit.
Yeah.
And
to clarify, Red's sister is like the god-ordained hero who will defeat the Demon Lord. Because one thing we haven't talked about with Banished from the Heroes Party is that it's kind of like an RPG world where you get assigned, I can't remember what it's called, like a job or a trait. And that like will define who you are and even alter your personality. And they actually kind of explore like, what does that mean for people? Because I think, isn't there one episode we watched where there's like a kid who gets his and it makes him a fighter and he doesn't like want to be a fighter and needs to like grow into it. And then isn't like Red's sister also just like, I do not like that I am this thing.
She doesn't want to be there either. And it goes into like, okay, it's almost like this like puberty thing of like, your body starts changing, but what if you don't like where that's going? What if you don't like what happens to you? How do you navigate that? And it's kind of showing like, this is something you have to live with, but that doesn't mean that you have to be a specific thing. There are still ways to like make that work with what you want to do in life. And I think that's really cool. And that's, that kind of the central thing of this first season is like, navigating that, like being told you have to be this thing. And you're like, but I don't want to be that. I want to do this other thing.
And like, I enjoy what this does with his sister in terms of her being the hero, because I'm pretty sure like in one of the episodes doesn't it establish like because she's a hero, her like trait or whatever means she has never slept since becoming the hero. She's just always awake. She doesn't need to sleep.
Yeah, because she's just always at 100%.
Yeah. And like so many like this anime kind of makes the hero look a little horrifying. Because isn't there one part when she realizes the asshole got her brother kicked out of the party? Doesn't she like instantly dismember and then heal him?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And it plays like the hero is this kind of horrifying thing. And what a lot of light novel animes will do is they very bitterly hate the idea of like the cool, charismatic hero and will portray them as basically just like a jerk ass jock that, you know, are super cool, humble protagonist who is absolutely a stand in for all the nerds who are secretly cool people. If only everybody else understood it, will show up and put them in their place. And here it kind of like plays around with the idea of the hero in a way that's different. And I like that.
It's way closer to like, you know, just I don't know, like being a child actor or something. Just like because she is a child, she shouldn't be doing this, but
Yeah.
everyone's like, no, you're doing this thing.
Yep.
You better not do
And
it.
she has the compulsion that like forces her to do it too.
Yeah.
So
it's actually like fairly deep for something that's supposed to be about relaxing.
yeah.
But I like the way that it progresses because once again you could run into that issue of like, oh, I'm comfy, but now the plot is happening. And I think like the first time something like threatens the idyllic slowness is some dude shows up and is like, hey, Red is supposed to be like this super cool adventurer and I need her to do stuff, so I'm gonna like sabotage the relationship. This doesn't work, and also like dudes get sent to like, you know, kidnap her. This doesn't work because she's very strong, and you think, okay, so it's just gonna be like there's no stakes because she's OP. But that's not true either, because that just introduces you to like there's some sinister stuff going on where this one faction wants these people to like, you know, do this thing, and it escalates that fairly well. Like there's some pretty good like political stuff in there, like you know, in universe politics, where like with the kid that we mentioned, basically like, you know, like he gets shunned for stuff and almost ends up radicalized in a bad way. And then, you know, Red has to like step in because he's like, I have seen this shit. I'm not letting that happen again. So I'm quite curious what the second season's gonna hold. Because, you know, the status quo does change. Like, there's different characters here now, and the circumstances are different.
There is one bit I love. I think we've talked enough about this one.
Yeah.
There is one bit I really love, and I think I saw like the tail end of the last episode of like you watching it. And there's a bit where Red's sister and Rit like both grab onto one of his arms because they want to spend time with him, and they glare at each other, and then realize they're being stupid and laugh it off, which I think is like great instead of a stupid like tug of war kind of thing.
One more thing real quick, don't watch the dub. The guy voicing Red sounds like he's asleep.
Yeah, don't.
Don't watch the dub, just watch it sub, even if it's a slow show and you might be tempted to put it on in the background.
So
fine.
The other show that's getting a second season that which we've watched is Urusei Yatsura.
What is there to say?
It's good. It's like you know, a remake of an old classic anime, but oh my god, it's so funny. Watch it.
It holds up like so well. Like this isn't like some Sailor Moon Crystal kind of crap where they don't understand what the appeal of the original was. It gets it very well.
Yeah.
And it's David production, so you know they're going to be a bit extra about it.
It's hilarious. There's like, you know, a bunch of like physical comedy of people getting abused, but everybody's a freaking maniac, so they deserve it. It's awesome. Check it out.
All right, what's next?
Let me pull the document back up. Delicious in Dungeon.
Dungeon Meshi. Yeah, love the manga. Looking forward to this. I don't know if it's going to be a good adaptation because I don't often read manga before they get an anime, but this was just not getting an anime and now it's over. And if you read the source material of anything for so long, you're always going to be like, oh, why does it look like that? What does it sound like that? So trailer came out and I was immediately like, oh, that's not what they're supposed to sound like, you know? But it's Trigger doing it. I'm sure they'll do a good job of it. And if not, the manga's not hard to find. So I think it's gonna be good.
The other show we've got on our list that we want to check out next season, and this is one I put on there, is Metallic Rouge by Bones. And I put this one on here specifically because, you know, we talk a lot about, well, I talked a lot about how, you know, everything's a freaking adaptation. Metallic Rouge is an original, like, anime, and I was like, I should put my money where my mouth is and check this one out. I think I read somewhere that it's kind of like an anniversary thing for Bones. And the general premise is it's like there's androids and cyborgs, maybe, but the titular Rouge is like this android girl who's being sent to Mars with her partner Naomi to kill 9 artificial humans hostile to the government, and I am absolutely positive that they are going to end up fighting the government. Because you don't start a story like that's just how these stories go.
Yeah.
Like, if people list it as a spoiler, like, oh, they turn on the government, I'm like, that's a spoiler to you? It reminds me of how, like, in the volume 2 collection of the Belgariad I have, which is like novel series of 5 books. Volume 2 has books 4 and 5. In the foreword, the author just outright says how it ends, and then it's basically like, come on. You know what kind of story you're reading. This is not a surprise. And, like, that's just like one of these things. It's just like, the government sent us to eliminate 9 hostile actors. You're fighting the government by the end. You are going to go rogue.
Also, like, the blurb here is just really concise and just tells you, like, this is what the show is. It doesn't give you any vibes, but the poster certainly does.
Yes, vibes are hugely important.
And I was just like,
to art.
oh, like, once you pointed this show out, I was like, oh shit, yeah, I'm gonna check that out.
That is something we should, like, do, like, maybe part of a podcast about, is, like, the art of the vibe and how important that is to art and anime.
I have an interest stack, as they call it, on my anime list. It's just a list of shows.
Yeah.
And it's called Mad Vibes because I watched Call of the Night, which is a very vibesy show, and the phrase "mad vibes" got used once, and I was just like, yeah, that's what that is. And I just made a list of similar vibey things, where it's just kind of like you're watching it, like you're like just like marathoning it through the night, and it feels like you're at this big party with your friends, and it's really vibey. And then even when bad things happen, you're still just really enjoying it, and then it ends. And then you just open the attic window and you just look at the sunrise. Man, that's what I wrote down. Because I have no other means of describing this. And if you know any Mad Vibe shows, please let us know.
I'm looking at the list of characters for Metallic Rouge, and I am, like, delighted to say there is one who is just named Noid262. And obviously they're an android, but the name Noid is just inherently funny to me.
Like the Noid from Domino's?
Sure, yeah. Noid. Hey, Noid!
Oh
my God, what a
I
name.
think that's like the stuff we immediately like. We're like, okay, we're watching those.
Yeah.
And there's so much. So, you know,
Yeah.
some things I was already like, okay, I'm not watching this. Like, my instant death ability is so overpowered, no one in this other world stands a chance. I can't not read it.
My instant death ability is so overpowered, the title can't fit in the goddamn live chart tile.
If you like that one and you're like, why did you use a nerd voice there, asshole? That's the only way I can read it, because this just tells me, like, oh, this isn't about anything. You just told me there are no stakes.
So it's episode 1 of our podcast, and I can already bring up, like, my anime guidelines that I try to follow.
Oh boy.
When looking for shows. And one of them, the easiest one, is the title. And my guideline is, does the show have a real title, or is it just a description of the premise? And, you know, my instant death ability is so overpowered, nothing can stop me. That's a description of the premise. Skip it.
As a supplement to that, I will forgive ones that, like, have a title and then, like, a subtitle explaining it, because I understand the necessity for having a subtitle if you just don't want to be like, look, I know there's a million of these, but please check this one out. This is what it's about. Because
Yeah.
at least they still thought about a real title. And Banished from the Heroes Party, like, the full title is Banished from the Heroes Party, I Decided to Live a Quiet Life in the Countryside. No, don't do that.
Yeah.
Do not have a title like this. I watched it in spite of that because I heard this rumor that the Japanese title is phrased in a way that makes it seem like the guy writing it was very mad at Tales of Zestiria, and I respect that.
Yeah, that's I used to call these rules, and then I switched to guidelines specifically because I was like, banished from the heroes party is one reason. And we can talk about like some others. But yeah, it's like the strongest tanks labyrinth raids. A tank with a rare 9999 resistance skill got kicked from the heroes party. That's not a title. That's a premise. A real title is, say, The Dangers in My Heart. You could make the argument that's a premise, but it's like too poetic to be like a straight up description. Unnamed Memory is a title. Tales of Wedding Rings is a title. You could make an argument it's a description, but it's too poetic.
Yeah.
It's too flowery.
Yeah.
So that's like one thing I look at when I'm trying to find an anime to watch when a new season's coming up is I'm like, oh, a description, skip.
There's like annoying trends that happen, right? Because like isekai is like not going away. I've just accepted people are going to continue doing isekai, whether it actually makes any sense for the story to be an isekai or not. But then you get these weird sub things, like the whole Villainess thing I mentioned, that's already played out, and there's like multiple shows like this in the upcoming season. I'm just like, really? Really? But then there's this other annoying trend that I'm noticing, which is like, oh, we're gonna be naughty, but it's actually just like eating snacks and shit like that. There was a show like that in the past season. Now it's time for torture, princess. The torture is that they're gonna make her eat good food.
Yeah, like I said.
And the initial thing made it seem like it was gonna be like dark and edgy and maybe a little kinky. And then the real poster came out and it's just her making a stupid face at food.
Not to be, at the very least, this one puts the word torture in quotes. So they seem to be aware of it.
I wonder what the Japanese title
Do
is.
not confuse this with a series actually called Torture Princess.
Oh, that's a different one?
There is a different series called Torture Princess.
This whole time I thought they were the same.
And just going off of the covers, it is actually dark.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well.
Like, yeah, just like looking at some of these, it's like, Sensuality. Am I gonna watch it? Probably not. Is that a title? Yes. Somebody thought about that.
If you have any particular shows that you are going to be watching that you might want us to watch, please do recommend them to us. We will, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can obviously just leave a comment, but at the end of the show, we will be giving you, like, other ways to, like, contact us if you want. Is there anything else here that really is popping out at us right now?
In a good way or a bad way?
Anyway.
Anyway? Alright.
If you want to talk about it,
alright,
you
let's
can.
see. I am shocked that Classroom of the Elite is getting a third season because not even the light novel fans liked that, liked the anime adaptation. That's one of those like mind game manipulation high risk high school light novels, and people swear up and down it's really good, but that's also what people said about Shield Hero and Ari Ferretta, so I don't believe them anymore.
Hey, Shield Hero was a really good 4-episode OVA.
Shame they never made more of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, just a bunch of these titles, some shonen stuff. Yeah, there's like
The
one
thing is,
or two there. I'm like, oh, that seems interesting, but then like something about it just made me be like, yeah, no thanks.
the thing with something like you saying like, oh, I don't get why this is getting a season 3 because no one likes it, even the fans don't like it. Obviously someone likes it, otherwise they wouldn't keep doing it. So with a lot of these, I am just like, okay, even if you're a fan of like a slow life isekai, you don't need this many in a season. You don't need this many light novels to get licensed by J Novel Club. But evidently there's money in it, because otherwise it wouldn't be happening. I'm really confused by that, and I really expected that the bubble would have burst by now on anime, but...
I suppose one of my few other thoughts is, oh my god, another Beast Tamer show? Ugh. Also, like, we're getting a show called, like, Hokkaido Gals Are Super Adorable. I actually read, like, a very brief but really interesting critique of the presentation of gals or gyarus in anime, and how that it was like actually a transgressive subculture that had been defanged and rendered otaku bait in like anime. And I find that very interesting, and it makes me like even more kind of like about like, you know, anytime you get a gal show like this. Like it feels like it's just, you know, like taking this thing and then scrubbing it down for the nerds to be able to like enjoy and not be threatened by. My last thing, I hope I don't come up with more to say about like the upcoming season is also maybe it's best to also break free of the seasonal anime thing. Like there is no rule saying you need to watch it as it comes out, as evidenced by the fact we only just watched the first 3 episodes of Frieren yesterday. Hell, maybe it's better to just, you know, watch it at your own pace and give yourself more time to like digest it. Because I really do think this stupid seasonal model has us in a point where we have to like watch, so we can keep having, you know, takes about these shows on the internet, so we can keep saying things as opposed to just, yeah, hey, I checked this thing out and I thought about it and here's my thoughts.
All right. Consider this. I obviously agree there's too much anime, and I would also much rather just have more time to watch it.
Yeah.
But a show like Frieren, people are going to be talking about that for years to come. It's not hard to remember, oh yeah, I never watched that. I should watch that.
Yeah.
But there's so many good shows that I like that will get buried immediately if I don't get on them while they're fresh and hot.
Yep.
And that's why I have to do this, because they're just going to keep pumping out like 50 plus shows every season.
Yeah.
And if I want to like go any particular place and be like, I should see if there's more good anime that I like, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah.
So I have to at least know which things aren't for me.
Yeah, and it's just like, it's important again, and while it's relevant and people are talking about it, because being an intelligent Chivalry of a Failed Knight fan in the year of 2023 is a nightmare. Like, good luck trying to hold an intelligent conversation about that series with a lot of people. Like, I want to say no shade on the people who like it, but I am throwing an immense amount of shade, because, like, Chivalry of a Failed Knight has a lot of, like, tropes and aesthetics in common with less good stories that use a lot of the same elements. And so what happens with those is people who will consume schlock will flock to those, and because most people aren't very good about telling the difference between what they like and what is actually good, they'll be like, this show is really good. And the people who can actually hold these, you know, rather intelligent conversations about like art and anime will look at these shows and be like, the shows that are all like this tend to be garbage. And then you'll get a good show like Chivalry, and they'll be like, well, it looks like the other garbage shows, so we'll pass. And then the few smart people watching that will only have, like, you know, the people who will also consume any other schlock and be like, oh, like, Asterisk War isn't all that much worse than Chivalry. And so you're just sort of stuck with the 1 or 2 people you can maybe find who really like this thing.
Well, at the risk of sounding like a huge snob, it's pretty normal for, like, any sort of like media, any fandom to only have like a small percentage of it be like people that you can talk to about it and really like at a really like high level, like really like digging into it.
Yeah.
That's normal. I think it's only noticeable of Chivalry because the fan base is so small, and that the only people who talk at like this level about that show are you and me that I've like encountered.
Yeah.
Because most other people are either like, okay, look, I'm not trying to find like something deep, I just want to be entertained, or people who are weird about it. I've met a lot of people who like have like just the craziest takes about this.
Shout out to the guy who's convinced Iki and Stella are real people
that was
in a different
real
universe.
That was a real guy. Like, I'm not trying to like mock people for having their own like headcanons or takes. There's some particularly weird ones in this fandom, and it's really noticeable because it's so small. You go to any other fandom, you go to like a huge fandom, you're still gonna get that. There's still gonna be weird people talking about you know, like, I don't know, Final Fantasy. I was gonna say popular anime, but like, if you think about really popular anime, so many of them are shonen ones that are just like, the stupidest people are the loudest about them, and so it's not even easy to say like, oh, you know, there's some fringe weird takes. because you go on Twitter and you'll immediately have someone saying something really fucking stupid about One Piece.
I'm sorry, One Piece fans. I'm so happy that you got your Gear 5 thing and liked it. I thought it literally hurt me to watch because I had to have somebody explain what happened in the manga to actually understand what the animation was doing. But also, the people, like, I am sorry, if you were like, Gear 5 is iconic, until a normal person understands what Gear 5 is, probably not. Like, sorry.
People don't really understand the word iconic.
No, they don't.
And once again, this is, like, people in, like, a general thing of, like, this is what creates, like, the anti-Twitter zeitgeist by people being very loud.
I have, like, an entire list of words I keep in my head that I'm just like, I don't think you should be allowed to use those. Like, I just generally think people should not be allowed to use these certain words because they do not mean anything anymore. Like, iconic, deep, media literacy. I'm like, shut up about media literacy because, like, the people who are not media literate are convinced they are, and so now the phrase has lost any meaning.
Mm-hmm. It's iconic is kind of like literally, where like it gets used in an ironic way and everyone understands what that is, but then some people don't understand that and just start using it wrong. Because like most people, when they're like, "Oh, it's like literally this thing," and it's like that's hyperbole. They don't actually think that it is literal.
And,
and the same with iconic. It's like you'll get like some. This is like a kind of zoomery thing, I think, where like it'll be like this character being iconic for 5 minutes, and it's like I see what you mean by that, even if it's not literally iconic. And then now you get people being like, Gear 5 is iconic. Why? Because you think it's really cool.
And to be fair, Gear 5 is iconic to One Piece fans.
That's also true.
To that specific group, it is a huge and important moment. But anybody who's like more iconic than Super Saiyan, I'm sorry, you are wrong. Here's one of the correct anime takes. Super Saiyan is one of the single most iconic things to come out of anime because even people who don't watch know what it is.
My parents know what Super Saiyan is.
Yeah. And like that's how that's what iconic is. I'm like, Gear 5 is iconic to One Piece fans, and I'm thrilled. And also, stop being so defensive. You have literally the most popular shonen series of all time. You have nothing left to prove.
Yeah. And Gear 5, like, it's still just, like, a really big power-up. Like, it doesn't really, like, represent a wider thing, so that's why it can't be iconic. Super Saiyan is just like, oh, the big emotional power-up in a show like this. Like, it codified that. That's what makes it iconic. And, in fact, if you look at Dragon Ball Super, I don't like Dragon Ball Super at all. But Ultra Instinct is now iconic because it means a specific thing that you can apply to a lot of other things.
And,
so, like, that's why people who don't watch Dragon Ball Super will still, like,
understand what Ultra Instinct is.
Yeah, they'll discover that term and be like, oh yeah, man, that guy just went Ultra Instinct because he
dodged
not
real
thinking
good.
about the thing.
And dodged real good. And, again, I can't believe I'm defending One Piece so much. And this is what defending One Piece is like for me. I don't do it a lot. Like, the Gear 5 thing, I've read a little bit about it, and it might have, like, thematic importance, because it's just like, oh, like, Luffy is this embodiment of freedom, like, when he gets to Gear 5. And given, I have not watched or read a lot of One Piece, but just hearing people talk about it, I'm like, oh, this series really doesn't have a lot of good things to say about authoritarianism.
Yeah, it's pretty based.
Yeah. So I'm like, all right, yeah, thematically, good. Iconic to, like, people at large outside of the One Piece fandom? I'm sorry, not quite. And also, that was not well animated. Okay, it might have been too well animated because it was just, like, so madcap and so much going on all at once and so stylized. I was literally just like, what am I looking at? Like, straight up. Visual noise, I do not understand the things happening in front of my eyes. Like, if you see a good sword fight, you should be able to understand the flow of movements. I watched the Gear 5 thing, and I was just like, huh? What were we talking about before we got to iconic?
The Gear 5 clip always just causes me acute brain fog, and I just think about how Luffy ripping, like, a mountain out of the ground to block just looks like him imitating a dog while the camera goes insane.
Yeah. And like when somebody explained that was what he was doing, that like, oh well, now like he can turn other things into rubber too, so he grabs the ground and pulls it up as a shield. I was like, oh,
I think
that's what's happening in the
I
animation.
think the bottom line here is it's okay for you to like a thing, and it doesn't have to be the most liked
I got
thing.
it.
Yes?
Yeah, we were talking about like Chivalry and how like the people who get attracted to that sort of
Yeah.
show.
I don't know, I feel like we just descended into snobbery as we were, like, talking about stupid anime titles.
I have seen people push back against the title snob because of like rooted in like anti-intellectualism, and it's just like, oh no, standards.
Yeah, but I don't want to be hostile to people who
Yeah.
are just like, okay, I don't want to enjoy something on like a super intellectual level. I just want to turn my brain off. Fine.
Oh.
That's fine. I also don't want to be hostile to people who might just be ignorant of a thing, and then now we're acting like, oh, you're a dumbass for not knowing that. No, never.
Also-
we should never be doing that.
Also, I remembered how we got here.
Right.
I started being like, maybe we ought to break, like, it's okay to also break away from the seasonal model and just watch things at your own pace.
Mm-hmm.
Which then got on to, like, the good shows getting buried and becoming
Right.
even harder to find.
Yes.
Which went into, it's hard to talk
Right.
intellectually about Chivalry, and then that's how we
Yes.
all got here.
Okay.
Recapping the podcast you have already listened to.
But I was kind of done talking about, like, my counterpoint there.
Yeah.
Because you kind of have to follow the machine, or you're just gonna miss things.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm trying to do that. But I think that's everything we have to say on the upcoming anime season, is it not?
Yeah.
So, that concludes the first episode of Correct Anime Takes. We have said nothing but correct things this whole time.
Absolutely.
I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. Did you?
Yeah, I had fun.
All right.
This is great. I wish I brought a glass of water up. We started and I immediately realized I made that mistake.
Well, it's the first episode, so it can only go up. We'll have our training arcs. We will have our big showdowns at the tournament.
We can literally only get more viewers than what we have right now as of recording.
Exactly. We're going to go to the podcast tournament arc, and we're going to place real high. We might not win. We might be the scrappy everyman. But let us know, what were your favorite shows this season? What are you looking forward to? Do you have any other comments, questions, critiques? You can reach us in the comments of this video, assuming you're watching this on YouTube. I don't know where else we're putting this. I don't know anything about podcasts, man. I just record them.
I would also say, not like, if you want to recommend an anime and it's not even from like next season, go ahead and recommend us older stuff. Why not? Can't hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. We can counteract that whole thing we were just talking about.
Yeah.
But you can reach us in the comments. You can also reach us at Rosie McDamsel on Twitter and Blue Sky. That's me. Rosie McDamsel channel on YouTube, if you are not watching on YouTube. You can also follow us on Twitch at Rosie Rosa, because we might record the podcast live in the future along with our gaming content.
I think that would be fun.
Yeah. We'll be releasing new episodes of Correct Anime Takes probably every few weeks or so. We're still feeling this whole thing out. If you want to be the first to know when a new episode is out, hit that subscribe button, ring that bell if you're so inclined, etc. See you next time!
Bye-bye.